Coaching in Session.
Your exclusive destination for unparalleled personal and professional growth.
With your host, Michael Rearden.
Whether you choose to live within limits or break free, your mindset journey begins here.
Welcome, Jenn Donahue, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, today we're going to be talking about your work, how you help empower leaders and teams. And I just love when people can not only help the leader, I guess you could say the head honcho, the CEO, but rather everyone else can flourish also under their tutelage and leadership. And I always say everyone is able to become a leader, but not everyone is born to be a leader. So sometimes it has to be learned, where you have to be able to see things, because in our world today, we can get so caught up in our own life, our own individuality. And it's difficult to sometimes say, okay, let me look at someone else. Let me look at my team. And we're going to be talking about all your work in just a minute. But if you could, can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help people?
Absolutely. As you said, I'm Jenn Donahue. I am a 27-year Navy combat veteran and served in Iraq, served in Afghanistan. When I retired, I was in charge of 1,800 personnel deployed all over the world. And that really brought home a lot of really hard leadership lessons, some that were easy, some that were hard. But I've used that now and I've become a public speaker and a coach. And I love going out and helping people create wonderful teams, how to be better leaders themselves, and how to overcome all of those obstacles that seem to get in our way.
In the military, would you say that leadership is easy to step into, or is it something that it takes many years for someone to become a good leader in the military?
I think it really depends on who you are. For me, I didn't have a lot of leadership experience going into the Navy. And it took a couple years for me to really try to figure out what kind of leader I was. Boy, I messed up big time at the very, very beginning. I just wasn't myself. I was trying to be like other people. And it really took a great mentor to help me figure out, like, hey, stop trying so hard to be somebody else. Just be yourself and figure it out. But there's some people who are just born leaders. Maybe they were the head of the football team or something along those lines. And so for some people, it was really a nice, easy transition to going in. For me, I definitely had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, I would say many people like to learn the hard way, especially in life when it comes to change or anything that involves them to take some level of action. People just like to be in their comfort zone, or, to do things that are, just, what they see, rather than, looking on the internal. Because I think sometimes when it comes to people learning about themselves, they have to look at the bad too. Right. They have to look at the parts where they might not be 100% confident in. And I always say, like, for example, like if you're going on stage for the first time, public speaking is going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. Like, you're going to be nervous. You're going to have that level of fear. But the more you do it, the more it just becomes another stage, and then you get used to it. But I think there's something to be said about that first time, right? That first step, that first stage, that first mic, first leap of faith, like in the terms of, doing something that you're afraid of. How can leaders become more confident without having the confidence that they have right now?
A lot of times I have to study and really understand what it is that I'm going into. I start to think about all of the different scenarios. What do I need to be prepared for? Is there something that I can do in order to be ready for that next step? And yes, whenever you go into something new, you've never done it before. So a lot of times you do have a little bit of that anxiety, some of that self-doubt. But if you go in prepared, I would say that that's going to set you up. Go talk to mentors, see what they have to say about wherever you're going, or talk to the people who are just in that position or were in that position previously. That's what I did. A lot of times in the military, it was easy whenever I was going to be the operations officer or the commanding officer. I'd go and talk to others that had been in that same position and try to figure out, hey, what do I need to be aware of? Where are those pitfalls? And that helped give me a little bit more courage in order to just say, all right, let's go do this.
hmm Yeah, very true. It's like not trying to invent the wheel every single time you're trying to do something. And I know people love to do it. It's like their favorite things to do sometimes. It's like, wait, I want to do this. And there's millions of people maybe who have done it, or maybe hundreds of thousands. And I'm just going to figure it out for myself. And of course, yes, you can make it your own unique thing. And of course, there is beauty in the journey and the struggle. But when you're trying to get someplace, right, it's not only that place you're trying to get to, it's beyond that too. And I think people that get stuck with the goal, just the goal. And I always say, like, you should have a goal behind a goal, because once you reach the goal, like, people talk about like a big house or a family, and they finally get it, and then they're like, wait 1 second, like, what do I do next? And they're like left in limbo, trying to like figure out that next step. And so my question now is, leaders are looking at a vision, right? They're looking at a mission, they're looking at what needs to be done. How can someone have foresight, whether it be the leader, whether it be just, a member of the team, have foresight for what's to come next? Because it's very easy to say, hey, this is what we're working on. And they work on it, they finally get it. And then now all of a sudden, it's like, okay, what do we do next?
In the military, it's really easy. You just basically work your way up the chain. A company commander, and then you're a department head, and then you're the ops officer and the CO, and then maybe the Commodore. So it's really easy to map that out. But I would say that in the civilian world, it's a lot more difficult. We are working on these complex problems, and it's taking all of our brain power. And then we finish it, and then we're just languishing, like you said. Like, what do we do next? And so when we talk about that foresight, like, what are we going to do next? I would say start to plan that at the very beginning of the project. That's that I always like to do, that is try to figure out, okay, what does this mean and where can this take us further from that? And then also grab your team, just have maybe a half day and start to think about, hey, what is this going to mean whenever we're done? And pull in the team, try to figure it out and say, hey, these are all the possible avenues that we can go when we're done. When we're finished, we can use this as a springboard for whatever we want to do next. I'm a huge proponent of trying to pull the team in and try to gather as many ideas as possible, because, what's the fun in just working in a silo? You got some people that are going to be working with you that have fantastic ideas. And a lot of times they want to be heard.
Yeah. The idea that, a leader doesn't, I think, always wants to be the person who's dictating, like, hey, I'm telling you what to do. Now, this is not to say, I know there's some people with some egos, and they're like, hey, I'm this guy and you need to listen to me. And, those leaders are definitely the ones that are probably not liked the most, right? They probably get talked, behind their back a lot. But there are leaders that help lift their team up, right? They give them responsibility. So for me, I guess I'm one of these leaders. I'm the boss. You need to listen to me. I'm very much, okay, let me teach you, and then let me have you teach someone else, right? So you learn and then you teach, versus, okay, I'm just going to be a person that's just going to tell you everything that you have to do. If you're not doing it, then I'm upset. So it's one of those things where, if we're trying to, make some big changes, it's important that we are trying to figure out, hey, I'm not just the boss, right? I'm the leader. So the aspect of leadership is not so much of only, being the person that gives orders, but the person that can guide people. I think of it as like a shepherd. A shepherd is going to be someone who is not only protecting the sheep, but it's also guiding the flock and the sheep, right? And if we think of it in that mentality, like, is there a way for a person to be, not like, I'm not going to say like a gentle leader, because I don't believe in a gentle leader, but is there a way for a person to, be a leader that is not only confident, forceful, knows what they want, and is going to have high expectations for their team?
So one of the things that I noticed when I first went into the military is that there were a lot of very authoritative leaders, the ones that basically yell at you, and that's how they expect things to get done. And if you didn't get it done, you were in all kinds of trouble. By the way, I tried that once. It worked out horribly, but that's a whole nother story. And what we have to realize, and the military has done a really good job of this over the last 20 plus years, is understanding more of what your team is capable of. And we're teaching that now to leaders, to say, hey, you know what, you might have these expectations, but are they realistic for the team that you have? And it goes back to really understanding what the strengths and what the weaknesses are of your team. If you need to have somebody come in so that you can bolster up the team, that's something that we're really trying to get to the point of, as opposed to just those authoritative, leaders that just say, do this, have it done by midnight, or else you're fired. That doesn't really work anymore. And people realize that. And there's really been a big shift. I've noticed this also a lot in the civilian world as well. I did have a boss that was like that. He had very high expectations of the entire team. A lot of us were very, very new, and it just did not go well. So he was constantly disappointed in us because we weren't living up to his expectations. And it took having a really good conversation with him. Basically, our team went to go talk to him and say, we're not ready for this. We need more training. We need more time. And it took a little while for him to realize that we needed more help. But once he did, then we really started to fire on all cylinders. And it was really starting to work well when he realized that, these are the capabilities of the team.
Hmm. Yeah. The aspect of building a team, I think it's very important, right? I think there's going to be good people for your team, and there's going to be people who just don't fit. Now, this is not to say that people can't change, right? Like, if someone's a jerk or something, and maybe they're a jerk because they have to wake up early or something, and they're in traffic all day or something like that. So maybe just saying, hey, just start at 10 versus 8 or something, and leave a little bit later, right? You can just do that small change, and maybe that's going to make a world of a difference for that individual. But then there's just some people who are just sour patches 24/7, and it causes maybe a toxic relationship in that team. So when you're picking your team, how would a person know that the team or the team member or the person in the team is the right fit? And the same thing could be said true for the leader. How would that team member know that this is the right leader for me?
When you're going out and interviewing your team, a lot of times they might have worked with other people. I would say go and talk to other people, try to figure out what is their past history. And then sit down with each one of them and really understand like what's important to you. What are your values? And you'll get a pretty good sense of who that person is pretty quickly. They might try to snow you over and, let you know that they're the best person ever, which happens also. But you'll also start to pick up on that and start to see through it. I'm a big believer also in just trying to understand your personnel. What makes them tick? What makes them want to get out of bed and come to work in the morning? What motivates them to work for you? And if you can tap into that and try to, I hate to say it, exploit that, if there's something that they love to do and you're able to provide that for them on the project, man, they are going to work so hard for you. And yeah, you are going to have sourpusses. I have a friend, his name is Grumpy Dawn, and he is just grumpy all the time. But you know what? He is really, really good at bringing projects in on time and on schedule. I mean, he's the best in the entire company. And so he has his value. And so one of those things where you might just have to talk to them separately and say, hey, you need to tone it down a little bit. Please keep doing what you're doing, but just be more mindful of the way that you're interacting with other people. And that takes a lot sometimes because they want to just be that gruff person, around everybody, and not everybody is willing to work with that type of person. And so as a leader, you just got to jump in there. You got to see where some of these personal strifes are and do what you can to try to mitigate them. And then whenever you're looking at your own leader, like who do you want to follow? Go find out who this person is. Go stalk them on LinkedIn or whatever it might be and talk to some of maybe their previous, coworkers or some and find out who they are. It's really easy to find, and especially in different communities, not, they're usually pretty small. You can find somebody who knows somebody. So I would definitely say, go find out. There's nothing wrong with a little recon.
Yeah, very true. I like the idea of, like when people are looking for work or looking for advancement in a position. And I know people, they have this idea or this concept, especially, I guess, in the civilian world, we'll call it that, climbing the corporate ladder, right? And it's just the idea of becoming a leader, right? So they do what they have to do, whether they have to get X, Y, Z amount of sales, or they have to manage this many clients or something along those lines. But then sometimes you get punished for being successful, right? So there's a saying that you shouldn't make or promote your best salesperson or something like that, because now they're in a position of leadership, but they're not selling anymore, right? And of course, maybe they could teach the team how to sell, but maybe they're not a good, presenter of how to transfer their skills to someone else. I say that if you can teach, right, that is a wonderful skill, but not everyone can teach. I remember when I was learning how to play instruments, and I was learning like piano and guitar and stuff like that. And sometimes I would get friends to come, help me with something, right? Because they knew how to play the guitar, they knew how to play the piano. And I would just ask them, hey, how do you do that? And they go, oh, just like this. And I'm like, just like what? Break it down for me a little bit, please. And they just couldn't do it because in their mind, it was like, it's so simple, right? And for me, I was like, it's not as simple as I would have liked it to be, right? So I had to, break it down. So when I became a teacher, I was able to say, okay, what's the smallest step, and then go from there, figure out where they were versus where I would like them to be, at the end. Like this is the end result, do it. Now, some people they love that, right? They love that. All right, this challenge, I have to have that, final goal, no baby steps. All right, do or die, burn the bridges, only plan A, right? Hey, I'm a plan B type of guy, right? So I have, multiple contingencies. I'm not going to have one source of income, right? But again, there's certain people who says, do or die. And when you have that mindset, does that help a person thrive in a team when they just have that plan A mentality?
I don't believe that it does. And a lot of times you ostracize everybody that's around you, because you're only looking out for yourself. You're not looking out for the team. You're not, helping the team be all that they can be so that they succeed, so that it's more holistic, that you all succeed and all move forward. So that's just going to look bad on you if you're not helping out your team. A lot of times management is going to notice that. It's just like, well, you might be great, but why is your team faltering? And I've actually found some of the best leaders are the ones that say, hey, you know what? I don't really care about going up the ladder. I just want to make sure that my team is as solid as they can be. And what happens is that their leadership notices that they are leading and creating a great team, and then they get promoted. So it might not be like their first objective is to get promoted, but they're just so interested in the development of their team that that's what really helps them go up the ladder.
Hmm. Yeah. I think of the type of training people need. For example, I'm a educator and I know what type of trainings teachers need. They need classroom management. They need time management. They need, maybe skill orientated things along the lines of if you're learning a new method for math, like a couple of years ago, like probably like 7, 10 years ago, whatever it was, they decided to make math different. Right. So it was no longer the long way of doing math. It was like, all right, we're going to separate the ones and the tens and the hundreds. And it makes sense. But if, you have to learn it. And so when that was being implemented in the, first, second, and third grades, the teachers had to go for training for that. Right. So it was something new they had to learn. And so my question is, what types of trainings, would benefit, leaders and teams, and then also the aspect of what trainings are people lacking today. So, for example, teachers might lack classroom management, and so they get a lot of training in classroom management, or they might not be good with time management, so they might get a lot of training in that. Where do you see teams and leaders struggling where they get the most training?
A lot of it has to do with time management. One of the things I've just noticed sort of over and over again is time management issues, especially towards the end of a project or whatever that might be, or maybe it's the end of the quarter. And because of poor time management prior, they're basically pushing all of their people, stressing them out, burning them out right before the very end. And so we have to be better at time management, basically all the way around. I would also say really understanding your people and understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, and more of those softer skills. I've also seen a lot of people who are having problems with that as well. Let's say 20 years ago, people weren't teaching this type of thing. They weren't teaching empathy. They weren't teaching, people about their doubts and how to overcome them and how to help their teams and things like that. So I've noticed that a lot of people who are maybe older, in the older generations, they don't care about that. And that's something that is very important. And it's also very important to the people who are working these days. I think something like 40% of people who left their job last year were looking for people with more empathy. We want to retain our people. And so just sort of going back and starting to learn a lot of those softer skills, I think is going to help out the leaders that we have today to realize that there is a new way to do this. Just like there's a new way to do math, there's a new way to lead, and they can still do that while still feeling empowered. They can still feel authoritative, but they can also just learn something new that is going to be more effective in helping out their own people.
I think of jobs that I've left, and either it was because the time was up, for me to leave because I transitioned to, my career or something, or there was just, someone in charge, the boss, the CEO, whatever you want to consider them, that it seemed like they just had this aloofness to it, like of not looking at all the work that I'm doing. Um, maybe not appreciating or caring. And it's not their job to care, but it does make the job easier, when you feel appreciated, like in your work. And this is one of the things I love to do, with, the people who work for me. I I just let them know that I feel, I feel so happy to have you with me, right? In the beginning, though, I was terrible at it, right? I would just give them raises. I would just give them more money. I would say, here's some more money. All right, good, right? But then it was just so funny because I'm giving them more money. And then they're like, thanks, thanks. Like there was no enjoyment, right? But whenever I said, good job, you're doing great, like their eyes would open up. They were like, oh my God, like he praised me. And so I say, okay, I'm just gonna start praising people more. Of course, they still get, increase in salary, but it was one of the things where I thought where money would just do the job. And I was so wrong. So you are, right on track with, a lot of people today are looking for that, acceptance, that empathy. And this is not to say that you have to be a leader that's always going around, and rubbing everyone's back and, saying, good job, you can do it, and being cheerleaders, right? Like there has to be a separation between, the leader and the team. And so one of the things I look at sometimes when I, work with companies is that sometimes the leader is intertwined with the team and and they have a good relationship. And the people, they just look as a leader, as a friend, right? Those companies do really well. But then I see like the companies where the leadership is like so separated. And I'm talking about our world today, right? From 2008, and the leader is separated, right? They have their office away from everyone. It's kind of like, don't talk to me, I'm very busy. And of course, they have their staff meetings telling people what to do. And those companies don't do too well down the road. And so we have to look at the trends now of just the past maybe 7 to 10 years. Do you see that if people don't adapt to this type of leadership, that they're going to be struggling for survival in the coming years if they don't say, hey, let's get on train or on track with how people are operating rather than what used to work?
I agree with you 100% on all of that. You can just still be the same leader that you were 20, 30 years ago. Great. Do it. And you're probably not going to grow because people aren't looking for that in their leaders, are not looking for that in their company. And so you're probably not going to be growing. If you want to grow your company, then you have to change as well. You have to get with the times. You have to start to notice your people. And you were talking about the money versus praise. I did a LinkedIn poll, I think 2 years ago, and just asked everybody, what would you rather have? A small raise or a thank you from your boss? And 84% of the people said they would just like to have a thank you from their boss. I mean, that's all the people are looking for. They want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be noticed for their individual contributions. That's how you retain your people. But if you're going to sit in your office and close the door and not really talk to anybody, you're probably going to do okay. You're probably going to go down a little bit. But like you said, it's those companies that are reaching out, they're being personable. They're looking at their personnel as individuals and they're finding out what those individuals need. And it doesn't matter if you're a group of 24 or if you're a group of like 1,800, you can help every single person within your organization. One of the best bosses that I ever had, he was in charge of the company. We started out at about 500 people. And when I left, it was about 1,200 people. But he made an effort to go find every single person in the company and talk to them. He had little note cards for each person in the company, and he would write down what he wrote or what he talked about with them so that he could remember all of those personal conversations. I mean, we went from 600 to 1,200 people in like 5 years. People wanted to work for him. People realized that, hey, you know what? I'm part of a team here. I mean, we had to basically beat people off with bats. I mean, people just wanted to come and work for him. Isn't that the way that you would want to lead people?
Yeah, it makes so much sense. But leadership is very similar to masculinity, I think, when it comes to like what does it take to be a leader. I think the authority figure or the authority term pops in their head, right? I'm first. I'm in front, right? There's a book. I don't like the book, like the mentality of it, because there's some flaws with it, but they say leaders eat last. And I like to think of leadership or just your own personal development as a cup, right? Your cup can be full, your cup can be empty. And if you are not full, how can you become overflowing so everyone else basks in your abundance? Because if you keep emptying, 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 eventually you're going to burn out, right? So there has to be balance, to that, right? Because of course there's going to be greed, where there's companies that their CEOs get millions of dollar raises, and people get barely half a paycheck for a bonus. And there's some companies that say, you know what, I don't want this big raise, right? I'm going to take the same raises as everyone else, right? So there's companies that do that. Now, I'm not saying it's a common trend where people are all of a sudden going to say, all right, I'm going to split my money, because people, they have their own ambitions, their own desires, they want to buy their mansions, their yachts, so they have their own lifestyles. And even though money can be a determining factor, it was 16% for some people, it is a factor still that we have to look at. There's a study done for teachers, with their, not only their appreciation, but to determine on if they are going to be more satisfied in their job. And guess what, the result was income, right? If they got paid more, they would be happy because they already love their job. They're not necessarily talking to like the principals or their directors or anything, because they're in charge for the classroom, and they're basically just given a position of leadership, saying you're the leader of this third grade class or fourth grade class or whatever, and this is the curriculum, so this is what has to be done. We'll check in 4 times a year. That's what it is. We'll check in 4 or 5 times a year, depending on your status as a teacher. If you're a tenured teacher, I think it's less. If you are a new teacher, it's more. And so they give you the support as you're growing, but then once you're kind of solid and you're flying strong, it's less, right? And so they are almost operating within the smaller teams of their grade level. So the first grader, like the first grade teachers are hanging out with them, 12th grade teachers are hanging out with them, band teachers or whatever, they're all hanging out together. And so do you find that when people are separated like that, not only in schools, because I'm using schools as the example, but industries where if you just hang around with this industry or this type of grade level or whatever, do you find that there becomes like some level of an echo chamber where they fail to see every other moving piece? Because a company is not successful because of one department. It's successful because every department is working together.
And that's true. If you find that you're just really happy where you are, more power to you. Maybe that's all they want to be. And so I have to respect that, maybe that's all they want to do. Maybe they don't want to go out and try new things or whatever that might be. And you know what? That's absolutely okay. Everybody's going to be different. But like you said, a lot of times we're siloed. And so we get in our silo and we do what we think we're supposed to do. And we don't look at the world around us and realize that there might be more. There might be ways that you can contribute to other teams. So I would definitely say if, have that curious mindset. If you get to a place where you're like, hey, I'm pretty happy, then just maybe start to think about, hey, how can I continue to push my bounds? How can I maybe be more? How maybe can I be more to other people? And so that would probably be my recommendation is that, if you feel like you're pretty middle of the road and you're happy, maybe start to think about how can maybe I help others? And that's where you're going to break out of that silo.
Hmm, very true. One last question, and then we're gonna and we'll get some final thoughts on everything. I always like for the guests sometimes to kind of share with us a book or a resource. It could be a movie, it could be a blog, it could be whatever that maybe was so impactful for you, or just many individuals that that you recommend it to people to look into. So again, it could be a book, a movie, it could be whatever, but a resource in general.
Wow, I read so many books and all of them are really fantastic. One that I just recently read was Overcoming the Imposter by Chris Kelso. That's one of the most recent books that I read. And it's all about, number one, understanding that it's okay to have imposter syndrome and even what it is, and then ways to overcome it. And I just found it really impactful because what it also did is, a lot of people who have it are like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't move forward or maybe I shouldn't do this. And he had a really novel idea of saying, hey, you're growing. You're doing something new. Get excited actually when you start to have imposter syndrome because this is the tipping point of growth. And so I thought that was, and I was like, wow, that is really impactful to not just worry about having it or what it is, but realizing, oh, I should actually be excited that I have it. So I thought that for anybody who might have imposter syndrome, I mean, like pretty much think 60% of the entire world has it. So if you don't have it, probably your team members do. Check out the book. It's really insightful about, hey, how do we not just identify it, but how can we, actually gain from this? How can we use this as a positive?
Yeah, very true. I read a lot of books too, so sometimes I am like, "Wait, what? Like, which book?" And then
Yeah.
so I kind of get mixed up with the new books versus the old books. But I do have books that I recommend by age groups. So, like, if you're like 18 or something like that, I have certain books you can read when you're mid 20s. Certain books, 30s, same thing, is because the mind is going to be just in a different place most of the time. I remember when I was a man, I was a whole mess. I had an ego. I was going out doing all the wrong things. And then it kind of mature, right? So by the 25, 28, I was right on track to where I needed to be. And, you know, one of the things you said early on was, having a mentor, right? Having a guide, being able to, guide you along the way. And that's when everything changed for me. I found a mentor, right? He was extremely successful. He was just out of getting into retirement, and he was just wanting to help people, right? Because he knew all of these things, and he had this air about him, very sweet, very gentle, but he had this bite to him that if you didn't do something, it was just like, what's going on, right? So a leader I would be so happy to work under, him and I spent a year and a half working together, or me just being under him, learning everything that he knew, or parts of it. Is so much you can learn from someone. This is just to be said that, leadership and development is going to be an ongoing thing, right? There's not going to just be one workshop or one seminar or one book. It's going to be something where you have to understand that, you might know something today, but then there could be something new that comes out tomorrow. We can look at our grandparents and iPads and tablets and things like that. Like, they didn't grow up with that, but they're learning it. They're learning computers. They're learning how to do things they might have never thought they would need. And so it's extremely flexible, or you have to be adaptable in the sense of whether you're a leader or you're a team member, because they say if you're not growing, you're dying, or if you're not living, you're dying, or something along those lines. The idea of leadership is about growth, and being a member of that is about growth, right? Working together for typically a common goal, right? And then, as we said early on, having a goal behind a goal is so beneficial. But again, if you have the right mentor, guide, or just someone in your corner, like a coach, or just someone to facilitate your learning and your guidance, is so helpful. So I would love to get some final words from you. And then, of course, please tell everyone where they can find you, reach out to you, get any of your resources or your offerings, that if they want to enhance their selves as a leader, or if they're someone who maybe is a team member who thinks that it's going to benefit the team, can reach out to you.
Absolutely. So, one of my final thoughts really on leadership is just boiling it down to trust. To me, that's just the absolute most important thing that you can ever do for your team. And you might not feel comfortable with that. Like, it might be hard to trust people. Maybe you've been burned before, or maybe you're new at whatever you're doing. Start small. Start with something and start to build upon that. Once you have that trust, it is so amazing what you can accomplish within your entire team. And so I would say that's probably the one thing that I would like to leave with everybody is start to develop trust with each member of your team, and man, you are going to see incredible results. Now, where to find me? Probably the best way is my website, which is just Jenn, Jenn, Donahue.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And really, I'm actually publishing a book. It's going to come out in March of 2026. If you'd like, I can send you a link. You can get the first free chapter. I do go out and work with other corporations and associations and trying to help them create the best teams that they can.
Awesome. And I'm going to make it easy for everyone. All the links will be right down below, website, LinkedIn. And of course, when the book comes out later next year or early next year, March, you are going to be in for a treat, I'm sure. I'm going to be definitely looking at that book because leadership is not something where it's defined by a time, right? Like I'm going to be a leader at this age or at this point. If I looked at my leadership, positions like from college. Like I was a president of the music club, and today I run a company. But if I didn't have all my failures, and if I didn't have all of the opportunities that I have had, I wouldn't be confident in my leadership skills. And the one way to do it is to dive into it, right? To learn more about it. And so I encourage everyone to check out what Jenn is doing, to continue to follow her and to, step into the leader that you can be. Jenn, I do want to thank you so much for coming on, spending some time and talking about your work today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really great.